What's that? Oh, already? Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome into Dark Tales. Get to hang out with me, Sven Skeleton, Mr. Pickles, as I read to you a story that I have written. Thank any and all of you who are actually listening and tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully this continues and I can continue to share my stories with you as they unfold, and we'll see where that goes. Sven's getting impatient. Mr. Pickles is ready to hear the story. So any of you that heard last week's story, I just want to kind of give everyone a little refresher. If you have not heard the first part of the story, you might be a little lost, so I would suggest that you go ahead and go back and watch last week's. Go ahead and listen to that before you check this out. So Andi was, our dear heroine Andi, was going through the house and kind of looking at receipts and paperwork, and then felt something watching her. And that was the last thing she remembered. So I'm going to go ahead and pick right back up. The light coaxed me from a deep sleep like the grave, my eyes merely hairline slits in the brightness of the guest bedroom. How in the question lingered, no answer came. I hadn't really ventured into this room, so the idea that I had slept in here made no sense. My head hurt and my mouth felt like I'd been licking sandpaper all night. I'd also somehow managed to strip down to nothing. I padded out of the room, wrapping the cushy throw around myself since I didn't know where my clothes were. This would be more of a concern if this didn't happen on a regular basis. I was more confused about how I had ended up in the guest bedroom of all places, but as I so often do, I just shrugged that off as well. I'm nuts, so this is normal behavior, right? Are we still talking? The house was warm with the heat of the morning. Sunbeams reached across the floors like long, white fingers cutting through the depths of murky water. I caught a whiff of something earthy, and not entirely unpleasant, but completely out of place in the brightness of the day. A tingle went up and down my spine as I recoiled from some flash of a memory. A moment outside of the present. My entire arm was throbbing, and there was a desert in my throat, so I shook it off and headed to the kitchen. I was in desperate need of a beverage and more pain medication. To my surprise, the Frigidaire was well stocked. Why hadn't I noticed that last night when I put the rest of the pizza away? My head hurt too much to consider why. I grabbed an unopened bottle of orange juice and fought to open it with my lack of two functioning limbs for several minutes. It burned going down, but felt better than the dryness. I rummaged through a cabinet and found some packets of oatmeal. I should probably eat as well. I absent-mindedly made the oatmeal and ate it without tasting it. I knew my stomach would thank me for it all the same. I rinsed my bowl, poured another glass of orange juice, cursed at nobody for the lack of champagne, then ambled my way into the living room and dug into the pharmacy bag for my pain meds. I took two and went to my bag to find some clothes. I was midway through the extremely frustrating process of dressing myself with my temporary handicap when the doorbell rang. Mel peered into the house as I opened the door, her red hair flames in the sun. Her smile cut me in two. I nearly fell into her embrace. "Oh my God," she squealed into my hair. "Andi!" She squeezed me hard, then held me back at arm's length to look me over. I took both of her hands in my one good one and kissed them. She looked nearly the same as I'd remembered, only a little older and maybe a little wary, but still every bit as pretty. We didn't speak for a few minutes, just basked in the happiness of seeing one another again. She broke the silence by exclaiming, "Ow!" upon noticing my cast. What on earth? Forgetting myself for only a moment, remembering only the closeness I felt with the person standing before me, I said it out loud. Adam did this. The tail end of the last word slithered across my tongue with a quick hiss, the sharp inhale at my realization of what I'd just said. Her eyes filled with bewildered concern for an instant. Then she smiled blankly and asked me, "What on earth?" As if she hadn't already asked this. I went blank, reading her face for any indication of a joke. I saw none. A bit dazed, yet also thankful that she hadn't seemed to hear me, or maybe that I had imagined the last thing I saw on her face, that momentary look of concern that washed away in an instant, but more curiously, as though it had not been at all. Whatever the case, I was glad that I wouldn't have to repeat it, or complicate my life further by trying to explain any further. Honestly, though, saying it out loud had been a moment of clarity that I had denied myself since it happened. I allowed myself a moment to bask in that feeling. "Oh, that," I stammered out, trying to sound as though I'd forgotten completely about the cast on my arm, or more accurately, the events that caused its existence, which was a direct lie. I did my best to sound careless, like it was really just the haphazard actions of my half-drug-addled mind, and not the injury caused by an angry man. I dropped a box on it, fractured it in 3 places. I was drinking, and it just sort of happened. It's no biggie. I smiled, hoping she would let it go. "Anyway, come in. I'll get you something to drink." She pushed past me into the house, like she'd done so many times when we were younger, grabbing me as she passed, spinning me into the house, dismissing my lie, or accepting it. She really did not react at all, which made me less comfortable for some reason. "I'll help myself. I mean, you're all broken. I have 2 capable limbs. In the name of efficiency, you're furthermore excused from hosting. Besides, I practically lived here when we were young. I know this house better than my own. You know that." And with that, she disappeared into the kitchen as I stood there like a mannequin, trying to process my shock. Some part of me heard the clink of glasses being sat on the counter, the swish of the Frigidaire opening, the glug 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 of liquid being poured. She was talking, but I had lost track of words. I was so focused on the sounds that I forgot that there was a person speaking to me. I blamed the painkillers and shrugged it off as I went to join her. She was already going through drawers. God damn, was I ever glad she was here. We spent a couple of hours on a mission. She was directing me this way and that, placing newly packed boxes with the rest. She'd stop to occasionally ask me if I needed whatever things she was about to pack up, or if it was going to Goodwill or to the garbage. It all made me anxious, so I'd dip into the pills. I'd reappear feeling dizzy, and she'd tell me to sit while she pulled things out of drawers and closets. She continued to ask about this thing or that. Half the time she asked, I just shrugged. She made a lot of decisions that I would have spent too much time struggling with. I couldn't believe I had tried to do this alone. It was late in the afternoon when we finally stopped to relax. I practically had to throw myself in front of her to stop her from noticing the red stains on the sofa. I tossed the blanket over it and sat down in the same moment. She giggled. "Okay then, I won't ask what that was all about." I could use a glass of wine though. I think I saw an unopened Chardonnay. "I'll grab it. Be right back, you weirdo." She was grinning at me as she left the room. It dawned on me that I was being really weird. Like she would really know whose blood was on the sofa. Why was I being so bizarre? Paranoid. I was being paranoid. Where was Adam, though? Chills ran down my spine as I remembered that I didn't know. Where was my cell? Had Adam called or tried to text me? I couldn't remember the last time I even looked at my phone. Where was my phone? Mel came back into the room, 2 glasses in hand, condensation already forming on them. She handed me one and sat on the love seat, facing me. I noticed something small and whitish in her hand. "Since when do you talk to spiritualists, Andi?" I must have left the card on the counter last night. I couldn't remember where I got the card, though an old man flashed across my mind just then. A kind man. Oh my God, he had been Arthur. I had to call him, let him know I was okay, and thank him again. What the fuck was wrong with me? I actually met him on my way here. I didn't know he was a spiritualist at the time, though. He was just kind to me on the train. "Please do not forget to call me. I will worry." What's up with that? She paused to raise a perfectly arched eyebrow at me. Is he hot? I giggled at the comment. Not exactly. He's a little old for my taste. He was just nice to me. I think I was careless with my meds on the way here. Mel's face was stuck, as though she was trying to make some connection. Oh, right. You don't know about that. I took a sip of the wine, crisp, cold. It felt nice. I ended up in therapy years ago. Have been diagnosed with pretty much anything. I think that they changed my diagnosis every couple of years. One hack told me I was paranoid schizophrenic. Nice, huh? I've been taking what's probably a dangerous cocktail of Xanax, Valium, Ativan, and who knows what else. There were many experimental drugs in there too. Too many for me to remember them all, for several years now. It's helped me cope. Mel's face melted into a compassionate smile as she stood up and slid across the room to set the card down on a side table, seemingly out of the way. She took a thoughtful sip of her wine as she paced for a minute, looking out the windows. You're not alone there, honey. I've been through about 20 different psychiatrists in the last 10 years. I've been diagnosed with a little of this, prescribed a little of that. There's a lot we don't know about each other. It's been a long time, so I suppose it's to be expected. Do you remember the last summer? The one right before I moved? She stopped in the middle of the room and cast a look my way that had a tinge of sorrow around the edges. I nodded, sitting more to the edge of the cushion, not wanting her to stop. She regained her composure a little and continued wandering around the room, sipping her wine before continuing. Well, I saw something in the woods. I never told anyone about it then, but later, I started having these terrible nightmares. Horrible things. She trailed off and visibly shuddered, every cell in her body responding involuntarily to the memory she temporarily allowed herself to go back to fully. I didn't want to interrupt, so I sat there silently, sipping my wine and wondering how this story related to what was happening to me, to what happened to Adam. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were all connected somehow. Just as I started to follow the thoughts, she spoke again. Then things got really fun. The visions, those hellish, horrible things I saw, they started to show up when I was awake. 1 minute, I'd be getting ready for work. The next, I'd be standing in the bathroom, blood everywhere. She paused to show me her left forearm. It was a lattice work of scars, white, raised, some of them large and long. I didn't even know I was doing it. It scared the shit out of my husband. Well, my ex. I suppose I should catch you up on that if you want. She returned to the love seat facing me. But I got the sense she was having a hard time relaxing. You were married? I couldn't hide the outward representation of my shock, which was presenting itself in the form of my gaping mouth. I realized that I was being rude and closed it, then continued with a more casual, I never would have guessed that. I mean, you were always so carefree. I can't even picture that. But what the fuck, Mel? Your arm. I thought I was the crazy one. It wasn't meant as an insult, and I had to pause before blurting out, shit, I didn't mean it that way. Mel just smiled again, took a sip of her wine. It's okay, Andi. It's all pretty fucking out there. Crazy is as good a word as any. I was just as shocked as everyone else. My mom didn't know. She still doesn't. I've kept this hidden from her this entire time. She would have taken Angel away from me. It doesn't matter, though. He's with his father. It's probably best anyway. Angel is... my son. Yeah, I know. Bizarre, right? I was absolutely taken with his father. It was really soon after I left here, so I was, 19? Yeah, Roman was the hottest guy. He still fucking is, much as I hate to admit that. Fucking shithead. Roman? I snorted. I couldn't help it. Yeah, I know, but it's his real name. The story is, he was conceived in Rome. His parents thought it was the perfect name. He is unbelievably hot, though. Hang on a second. Mel got back up, Mel got up and came back into the room with her purse, taking a seat next to me on the sofa. She pulled out her cell and scrolled through, giggling at a couple of things that she didn't show me. Then she showed me a picture of her and a little boy. He was smiling through a face covered with chocolate. This is my little bean. God, isn't he the sweetest? I looked at the photo, but it was all too removed for me to have any kind of emotional attachment to. I felt bad about that, but I just felt nothing. I faked a smile. He sure looks like you, covered in chocolate even. He must be your kid. She giggled, then continued to scroll through. Aha! Here's Roman. She handed me the phone. The guy in the picture was seriously hot. His smile was so wide it was day-glow. His green gold eyes sparkled. He looked happy. Yeah, but X? Her face dropped a bit. She slid the phone out of my hand and flicked the image away, then dropped the phone back in her purse. Yeah, he couldn't take it anymore and found himself with another woman. I wasn't really there anyway. My face was frozen in shock and dismay. What a bastard! The words came out harsher than I had intended, and I had a quick memory of Adam, remembering how angry I was, how shocked he had been, how he'd disappeared. I shook it off as Mel touched my leg, as if to rein me back in from wherever I'd gone. She must have thought I was affected by her words. She replied, her voice dropping a tone. I stopped hating him, Andi. I forgave him. I just can't help it that I miss him. I wish... She trailed away, lost in a thought or a memory that I couldn't follow. She snapped back suddenly as if out of a trance. Wow, well, enough about me. What's up with you? God, Mel, I'm sorry. I don't even know what to say. I meant it. She shook her head, her red locks cascading down the sides of her face. Oh, don't worry your pretty little head about it. Hearing about your life will make it okay. It's been a really long time, Andi. I've missed you and have wondered all this time about you. She looked at me then with this kind of genuine concern that would only be recognizable to someone you had shared secrets with. I read your books, though, but that's not everything, and I know it. Fill in the blanks? She smiled. I sighed and scratched my head with my good hand. Yeah, well, the tragic life of Andi. Would you like the abridged version? She snorted and play-slapped me. Don't be a brat. Shit, Mel, you know the tale. An unhappy teenager moves away from the oppression of her small-town life to the big city with her big dreams, all of which get waylaid for one hot guy after the next. It's a miracle I ever got published in the first place, let alone made a career of it. I can write about love, but wow, in actuality, do I fail at it? I paused, took a long sip of wine. I think I've been in love 1,000 times, yet no husband, no long-term, no house with a picket white fence and a dog. I scoffed as I said this because it wasn't what I actually wanted. I think the only thing I really wanted was not to be alone, but that's human nature, really. I just seem to float on a never-ending sea of whatever it is I tell myself I feel until it's gone, then I'm alone. I watched Mel's face after the last word left my lips. She was focusing on something 1,000,000 miles away, though for anyone else looking in on the scene, it would have seemed as though she was merely looking at the glass in her hand. Her voice broke the temporary spell. You're not that tragic, Andi. Do you remember when we were young and we'd think we couldn't wait to grow up so we'd have it all figured out? She kind of giggled, then abruptly flattened again, continuing. Yeah, we grow up and find out that everyone is faking it. That's the tragedy, not you, not even me. She paused and sipped her wine again. The glass was almost empty. What was it you wrote? I think it was something like, we couldn't wait to grow up so we'd have it all figured out. Yet when we grow up and find out that everyone is faking it. That's the ultimate tragedy. Life is a beautiful lie. That's the thing all those damn grown-ups learn that they struggle so hard not to tell their children. You memorized that? She smiled at me through her hair. Andi, you might not realize this, but your words are powerful. I must have reread that part about 100 times because it's so relatable, especially now that I have a child. So yeah, I memorized it. Don't let it go to your head, though. She winked at me. There's more to it that I can't quite remember, though. Do you? It was strange being asked to recite my own writing in this setting with a friend I hadn't seen in so long, but I found myself responding all the same. I believe the rest goes... I think not out of cruelty, though, as I once did. I think it's hope. They hope their children will somehow prove them wrong. Then they sit back and watch the lie unfold. You can hear it in their voices. It's that hint of, "You're a failure," that we never figure out. I believe it's that. I believe we failed to prove them wrong. It gets in the way, and they get older and face death knowing the truth, that it was all an illusion, and they lied about it, which makes it all the more unbearable. Then they are what perpetuated the lie. She continued, "There's some powerful truth there. There's so much about life that's awful. Too awful to face. I guess that's being a grown-up. Growing up means playing along with some set of rules that we all believed at one time or another didn't apply to us because we weren't in that club. It seems that you've just not joined the club yet. You should be glad, Andi. You never have to tell your kid the lies. For the time being, neither do I. Though I've certainly caught myself doing it. It's a terrible feeling." We sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping our wine, listening to the house, and mulling over the things we'd discovered. I wanted to tell her everything, if for no other reason than to say it out loud and have someone else that I trusted tell me I was being ridiculous. Instead, I went to get my phone. I needed to check first. I found it in my bag, which I didn't remember putting my phone back into. I shrugged it off and started flipping through my notifications. There were about 24 texts from random people back home. Some asked if I was okay being back here, how I was holding up, just friends offering support from afar. I scrolled through the list of new messages, satisfied that there was nothing to report. Then an odd thought occurred to me. Mrs. Adam had Adam's cell phone. She'd had it the whole time. Why did she have it? I grabbed the nearly empty Chardonnay bottle and headed back into the living room. I poured the rest of the wine into our glasses, then found myself saying, "Mel, can I tell you something?" Mel listened to my entire story. She never once raised an eyebrow in judgment or scolded me. She didn't jump in to make remarks about his behavior or treatment of me. She listened, sipping her wine here and there, but never giving me any indication that her interest wavered. When I was finished, she sat her empty wine glass down, wrapped her arms around me, and just squeezed. She said nothing for a good while, just held me. I eventually broke the moment. What should I do? I pushed away from her slightly so I could see the look on her face and measure her words. She said nothing, just smiled as she stood, then patted across the room and picked up the card from the side table. She stretched... English, I speak it very well. She stretched her arm out and handed it to me, her face a mask of serenity, her eyes sparkling. "I think you met him for a reason." She went to the other room and I heard her gathering her things. She poked her head back into the living room. "Sweetie, I'm sorry, but I gotta get home. Call him, though. I feel like, I don't know, like he's going to be able to help." It felt weird that she was leaving, even though I already knew she couldn't stay late. The timing was unfortunate, and for a moment I couldn't help feeling that I had scared her away, even if I knew deep down that I hadn't. She came back into the living room and pulled me off the couch, thankfully by my good arm. She put her arms around me, squeezed me, kissed me on the cheek. Then she pulled back a little and gave me a strange look. "Do you smell that? It's like the earth." I took a glance around as I sniffed the air. I did catch the faint scent of damp earth. I've been smelling that ever since I got here, off and on. I can't find the source. What do you think it is, though, Mel? I think you need to call that Vlad dude. She looked through me for a second, her skin going pale. She stepped back as if steadying herself. "You're not alone here." "Yeah, obviously, silly. You're right in front of me." Her look was stern. "I mean, in this house." Her gaze wandered past me, into the hallway behind me, as if she was focusing on something. She snapped her eyes back towards me. Seriously, call him. I really have to go. I walked her to the door and hugged her once more before she walked out. After she'd pulled away and I could no longer see her taillights, I went back to the kitchen and picked up the cordless. I checked the clock and decided it was probably okay to call since it was only 6:44 p.m. I still had his card in hand, so I flipped it over and dialed. An old lady answered the phone. I nearly hung up, but something made me ask for Vladimir. She told me to hold on one moment. Then there was muffled hollering in a language I didn't speak. A moment later, I was greeted by the somewhat familiar voice of the man I'd dubbed as Arthur. I stumbled over what to say. What came out was something like, "Hi, I have your card here. We shared a train. I hope I haven't disturbed you." I sounded robotic. I tried to collect myself a bit before I said anything else. He chuckled. "No, my dear girl, not at all. I was worried about you. I'm glad you called. I think we should meet. Something tells me that there's a lot going on right now, and you could use the ear of someone that understands things a little, shall we say, differently from others. Would it be forward of me to insist that I come to check on you?" I hesitated and checked in with myself to see how I felt about that. No, not forward at all. The next sentence left my mouth before I could stop it. "Do you want to come now?" He accepted instantly and assured me that he wouldn't stick around and take up too much time, but he felt the need to see the house. He asked for my address and gave me his to ease any ideas I might have about trusting him. He told me I should Google him also, just to be sure. I didn't feel the slightest bit of unease that he was coming here. If anything, it felt completely okay. Maybe it was because he had taken care of me when no one else bothered. Maybe it was his accent. But there was just something about him that I felt that I could trust. Once I had disconnected the call, I stood there in the empty kitchen. The house was quiet, maybe too quiet. Since Mel's laughter, kind words, and sarcasm weren't filling the spaces around me anymore, it felt eerily uncomfortable. Vladimir had told me it would take him about an hour to arrive, and I didn't want to pack anymore, so I decided to go outside. I meandered around the property, and eventually I found myself in front of the old weeping willow by the woods. It had been there long before I was born, ancient, something out of a fairy tale. I laid my hand on it, and as I did so, I remembered loving this tree. There was something else, something missing. So much of my mind felt locked down. All the years of intense therapy, drugs, who knows what else. I only remembered being told I had created a coping mechanism over and over again, and that I needed to just let it go and accept what really was. I felt that something had been amputated from me. Some huge part of who I was just gone. I stood looking up into the branches that surrounded me. I turned back to the massive trunk and noticed something. I leaned in closer to it. There was something carved into the trunk, close to the base of the roots. It was a heart. Inside of it was an eternity symbol, and inside each loop, the initials A and N. A wind suddenly whipped out of nowhere, blowing leaves and lawn debris away from the base of the tree. There was something shiny on the ground. I reached down and picked it up, held it up to the light to investigate. It was a necklace, a simple silver chain. On it was a skeleton key. What the? As I turned it over in my fingers, I felt something trying to come back to me, like a small tugging at the base of my skull. Something so familiar about this thing, but I was so removed that I couldn't connect the pieces. The carving, the necklace, the key. What does all of this mean? A silvery ache traced its way across the nerves in my head. Why can't I remember? I was reaching for some small piece of what had been wiped from me, but I couldn't get to it. It was as though I was very small, and it was at the bottom of a very large tower with no footholds or way to climb it, but at the top of the tower were all the answers. As I stood there, holding the key in one hand and my head in the other, I heard movement. I looked into the shadows from where the noise seemed to have come and saw only a shimmer of movement. Hello? I sounded like one of those people that wanders the streets talking to no one. Oh God, what am I doing? There was desperation in my voice. I sat on the ground, very much like a toddler that has lost their mommy in a department store. I gave in to the defeat. I don't remember anything, I shouted as if the sky would answer me. The wind whooshed around me, wrapping me inside it. There were faint sounds like a voice, but I couldn't make out words. I dismissed it as my mind playing tricks on me and ran to the house. I'd take my pills and all of this would go away. I was running towards the house on legs that felt like shaky rubber. There was a panic spreading over my reality. I could feel the ends of my nerves frazzling. Something in the wind shifted. I swore I felt something touch me around the back of my neck. There was nothing there. Oh God, I sighed into that nothingness. I'm losing it. I got to the back door and rushed inside. I practically sprinted to my bags. I reached in and grabbed a bottle. I didn't even care which one. I dumped out a pill and took it to the kitchen. I tried to pop it into my mouth, but it jumped from my hand as though someone had bumped me. Shit! I picked it up and tried again. It jumped from my hand again. Oh, come on! I tried once again, and again the same thing happened, only this time it went down the drain. Oh, come the fuck on, seriously! I went to the other room and rifled through my purse, but all the pills were gone. The bottles were gone. I looked around the floor, the sofa, and in the other bags. No pill bottles. The only thing that was left was the bottle of painkillers. That will have to do. I relented as I popped the pill before heading to the sink to get some water to rinse it down with. I still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there with me. I chalked that up to my multiple disorders and refused to acknowledge the unseen. I'd figure out what I'd done with my pills later. For now, I'd wait for my visitor. A spiritualist? That's a new one. Well, it couldn't hurt. I had nothing to lose by having a kindly, though potentially a little unconventional, elderly gentleman come check on me. Hell, maybe he'd have some answers about what was going on in this house. I hadn't noticed that the key was dangling from my neck. When did I put it on? I looked at the key again, turning it over and over in my hands, feeling the cold being warmed by my skin. Keys go to locks, I thought very logically. What could this open? There was a whisper of movement around me and I froze in place. The overwhelming feeling of a presence there would not let up, but there was nothing there. Being back here was obviously disturbing me and I just wanted meds. My meds! What had I done with them? I double-checked the bags and all the contents I'd haphazardly tossed around in my previous search. They were still not there. I had no memory of doing anything with them, and I couldn't figure out where they could be. I even checked the medicine cabinets in all 3 bathrooms, just in case, with no success. Since they were all I had left, I took another painkiller and ate some cold pizza straight out of the box while standing over the kitchen sink. I checked the time. I still had probably a half hour or so. I needed to sit down. I'd be okay if I just sat down for a minute. The doorbell pulled me from a nap I didn't know I'd needed. I was so tired. Maybe it was the wine and the painkillers. I couldn't blame my other meds since I didn't have any. I opened the door and found Arthur standing there. Oh wait, he's not Arthur. What's his name again? Vladimir Lupai. But please, call me Vlad. May I come in? Someday I would learn to stop being shocked when people seemingly read my mind. Yes, please. Sorry I'm a little out of it. I had fallen asleep. He shook a crooked finger at me. I just want to stop right here and interject. I'm very sorry for this wackadoo accent. I'm trying to represent this character. He is not an English speaker, and the way it reads in your head when you're reading the text, you can actually kind of hear this accent. I don't know if I'm going to continue to do it in this accent, so just forgive me if I stop right now. All right. He shook a crooked finger at me. Now, no need for apologizing. I imagine you are experiencing a lot. It's understandable that you are tired. Where can we sit, my dear? I gestured towards the living room with my bad arm. Ah! You're not going to tell me what really happened there, but that is okay. He looked around, assessing the surroundings in a way that I wasn't entirely familiar with. He took a seat on the love seat. May I have a glass of water, my dear? I get very thirsty when I talk, and there is much to tell you. Vlad held the water glass in his hand for a moment. He wiped the edge of the glass with a cloth in a circle 3 times, said something in his native tongue, then took a long sip. It seemed like somewhat of a ritual. I didn't ask. All right, we got a cough, we got a chair fart. All right, what else are we doing? All right, my dear. Are you ready for this? I was too interested in hearing more to say other than, yes, I think so. First of all, your name is Andrina, but you go by Andi with an I. You've been away from here for a very long time, I think about 10 years or so. There are some awful, terrible, long-buried secrets hiding here for you. Things that you don't really remember thanks to years of therapy and pills, which is how you're able to be okay to be here now. He paused, looked around, took another sip of water. You are a creator of worlds, a writer, yes? Very nice. I have always had such admiration for the art types. I have no such talents, I'm afraid. All my talents are reserved for communication with things unseen. Okay, so far so good. I knew this part of the game well enough. Established the baseline. He could have seen my name and searched me on the internet to find out I was a writer. He could have enough experience with broken people to just assume that therapy would be involved. I didn't have the exact answers for that, but it could be. However, I didn't know exactly what he meant about terrible secrets here. My family was, well, complicated, and I didn't have a close relationship with my parents. I decided to be open-minded. It wasn't as though he'd been totally off the mark so far. I know you don't entirely believe me, but I also know that you've had questions about your life. I know you suffer in love, for instance. He paused and shot me a careful glance. I thought, to catch my reaction, which I admit, I let out a small gasp and had to bite my lip. I flinched when our eyes met. He didn't react, just continued with his assessment. You are the perpetual dreamer. The die-hard romantic in you won't allow you to settle for average. He smiled at me then, warmly. It filled me with a feeling of calm. I felt lost in his words, soothed by them somehow. What is it about a stranger's evaluation of ourselves that can create this kind of spell? I lolled for a moment. That's lolled, not lulled. That's lolled, L-U-L-L-E-D, for a moment. I'm sorry, but that really made me laugh. I lulled for a moment, allowing the feeling of serenity to wash over me, and did not immediately fight it off. He took another sip of his water and glanced around the room, then back to me. You have a hard time relating to your peers that have average, kind of mundane peace or happiness with mates. You find yourself unmoved by those around you, telling tales of their day-to-day or sharing baby stories. You just had a reminder of that this afternoon. This was getting very real. Very quickly. How'd he know? Maybe he wasn't a hack. I fought back any indication I might present that he'd hit a nerve, which wasn't that much of an effort since it's pretty much just my nature to be guarded. You don't know a lot about your childhood. In fact, probably nothing at all. He sucked the air in between his teeth, then paused to see the confusion in my eyes. Yes, I'm sorry to say, but they really did a number on you. It's not my place to tell you everything. That will come in time, and in a situation that is going to be more appropriate than this one. I hope you won't hold that against me. I have other, more pressing matters to share with you. You have been called here. Dare I say summoned by something greater than you know. I understand that there was a situation, with your parents. I also know that you really aren't upset about it. That's not even the most interesting part. He stopped there and closed his eyes. For a brief time, I actually considered that he'd fallen asleep. I was about to tap him on the shoulder when his eyes shot open, alert and aware of my approach. I do apologize for concerning you. I was communing. There's a lot of activity around you. I have to sort through all the voices and find the ones that aren't lying to me. It's sometimes a tedious process because some spirits can be mischievous. Always a troublemaker or two in the mix. He chuckled, amused by something I didn't understand. Yes, they're strange beings, but so are we, for that matter. From what I can gather, they know something else is going on. There's a force here. Old, unknown origin. He watches you. Okay, what? This just seemed out of left field. Then again, I had been feeling that something was here. He? Vlad took another sip of water. Oh, very much a he, indeed. The absolute definition of a he, though, might be liquid. Not entirely, how shall I say, human? One could say a man who is not, in fact, a man. My face was threatening to betray me. I had the distinct memory of having thought something, no, the exact thing at some point when this journey started. My own thoughts haunted me. A man who is not a man. I tried to keep my face stoic, unmoved. I didn't know how well it was working, but he either didn't immediately notice or perhaps just did not react. In fact, Vlad sat silent for a moment, contemplating my face. Then his eyebrows shot upwards. Ah, you have a history, you and he. What history? I searched as far back as I could to find any indication of what he could possibly mean. My brow furrowed and my muscles tensed. I couldn't think of anything as open-minded as I was. That said, I couldn't help but feel connected to the thing he was speaking of. But I could not remember anything. But of course, you have been brainwashed. I'm afraid that most human beings don't have the capacity to understand that everything we can't explain outright does not instantly indicate that someone is certifiable. Believe me, child, I have seen and heard it all. I spent little time in institute myself. I can recognize when someone with the gift has been silenced. This all may sound a little absurd to you. If you decide you think I am nothing more than a crazy old man, you may ask me to leave. I think it would benefit you greatly to hear me out, though. I had no reason not to. Maybe he'd be able to help me understand why things, including Adam, had gone missing. No, please, continue. I was careful not to say more, as to not give him any suggestions. I'd seen enough of those claiming to have some kind of second sight to know they were very good at taking a piece of information given freely and turning it into some kind of means to prove they were tuned in to the person who so desperately wanted direction than to offer any of that. Very well. He took another sip of water. He's not here right now. We can speak freely. He means you no harm. In fact, he's been protecting you for a very long time. I don't know with any kind of certainty that his ultimate goal is sacrosanct. Because he does want well, he does crave to be with you. He feels some deep desire to claim you. I'm sorry if this makes you uncomfortable. Shall I elaborate? My eyes were wide and all the hair on my neck was on end. What do you mean? There's some kind of what? Demon? Something wanting to possess me? My words were intense, but spoken with a subdued kind of calm. I mean, a being wanting to possess me? That would certainly explain a thing or two. Vlad shook his head. No, my dear girl, no. Nothing like that. Well, there's no other way to put this. He's deeply connected to you. You are, in fact, not strangers to each other. My mouth very nearly began to betray my will to remain silent and just listen. I stopped myself midway through some kind of protest. I'm sorry, this is just all a little odd to hear. I don't mean to be rude. I'm interested in what you have to say. It's just not easy to believe. Part of me wanted to believe this, but I'd been told for so long that these kinds of things aren't real and that I was truly struggling with the concept. Even though something inside me was practically screaming to be awoken. Of course, my child, this must all sound like the ravings of a lunatic. But you are suffering, and I only want to offer a little consolation that you are not crazy, as you were led to believe for so long. I know they probably did a lot of terrible things to you to make you forget. You don't remember him. He feels that from you, and it wounds him. He's paid some kind of terrible price for his feelings for you too. I do not know more than that, I'm afraid. Simply put, he's just as important to you as you are to him. I sat there dumbly, staring open-mouthed at the carpet, turning his words over and over again in my mind, trying to make some sense of all of this. Your medications are missing, yes? Much to my dismay, shock washed over my face. How'd he know that? Don't be startled. He took them away. He doesn't want you to overdose. You've been careless. That's what was going on with you on the train. I'm right? I didn't want to admit it, but I knew he was right. I'd been extremely careless. Glossing over the information I'd just been given about some invisible creature hiding my medications, I opened up. There's something else. The words escaped. I couldn't think of a quick recovery. Vlad interjected, seeing my discomfort at my sudden start of a confession that I didn't know how to stop. I know there was a situation, and I know what happened to your arm, why you're wearing that lovely cast. There's no need to repeat that tale now. He sipped his water again, allowing a moment for me to accept that I didn't need to tell him anything more. He gently smiled, then continued. As for this presence, I only know he doesn't want anything or anyone to harm you. I know nothing else. I apologize, as I understand that has been a cause of great concern. Perhaps if your mind starts to return to you, you will find the answers you seek. There is only so much I can tell you. He took another sip of water as I took everything he'd just told me into consideration. The skeleton key around my neck bounced out from behind my shirt as I leaned forward. Vladimir instantly choked on his water. Oh, my darling girl, may I see that key around your neck? Yes, of course. I took it off and handed it to him. Oh my, he exclaimed as he rubbed it between his fingers. This is very, very significant indeed. You don't yet know what it goes to, do you? I shook my head no. Well, you should look. This unlocks a very special doorway. I believe what lies inside it will answer some important questions for you. Also, is there a tree that stands out to you somewhere nearby? The image of the weeping willow immediately jumped forward. A key and a tree. This wasn't making any sense. There is a tree, actually, an old weeping willow. That's actually where I found it. I was saying too much, but it was just flowing out of me. He handed it back to me, and I instinctively put it back around my neck. Vladimir tenderly smiled at me. That's very interesting. There is a reason you didn't just lay that on the table. I think some part of you remembers him. I can't help but wonder if there are some things you aren't talking about. It's perfectly okay. You are entitled to your secrets. And being guarded, dare I say skeptical of me, is also very understandable. But tell me, have you seen anything that you can't explain? I don't know why I told him, but I did. I told him about feeling the presence and the inky shadow of hands and the whispers in the breeze. He touched my knee the way a grandparent might do. You're not crazy, dear girl. I can't make you remember him. I can't answer all the questions that I know are burning in your mind. I do believe that you should find out what that key goes to. And I think you should be glad he hid your pills. He is of no danger to you, as I've already said. Don't be afraid to be here. I should warn you, though. Remembering him, well, it's going to bring back other things with it, I'm afraid. There's no way to avoid it. But you are safe. The things that caused you suffering in this house, he paused, looked upwards towards the ceiling, then back to me. They are all dead. He finished the last of the water, then looked at his watch. I'm afraid that I need to depart your company now. You have my number. I'll see myself out. He turned back from the hallway and poked his head back into the living room where I was still sitting on the sofa in shock. Find what that key opens. Good night. I heard the door shut behind him. I sat there for a very long time, not knowing what I believed. Was he crazy? Was I? I'd been convinced of my own fragile mental state for so long that I never really thought to question the possibility that I wasn't. I had no recollection of whatever thing Vladimir had thought I experienced. Not in this house. Not certainly with an ancient being, whatever that meant. How the hell was I going to get through this without meds? I'd come to rely on them. I didn't know if I was even capable of functioning without them. At least I had the painkillers. They didn't do much to me, honestly, but it was better than nothing. I dug them out of my bag and counted how many were left, committing the number 15 to memory. I made a promise to myself that I would count them every time I reached for one, mostly because I had to make them last. I quickly scratched that number out and replaced it with 14 as I forced my legs to move and take me to the kitchen for orange juice to swallow number 15 with. My arm hurt. It was justified. I thought for a moment about stating my intentions out loud, in case there was something here monitoring me. I laughed at the idea. Wow, Andi, you really are something. I turned to see if there was any movement, maybe liquid darkness flowing in the shadows. I listened for any hint of a whisper of a voice. There was nothing. I swallowed my pill as I rooted in the fridge for something to eat that wasn't pizza. I found some grapes that seemed fresh and English, I speak you. I found some grapes that seemed fresh and some unopened, completely unrotten salad mix. It suddenly seemed weird to be eating food that was purchased by people that died within a day or two of buying it, but I had to eat. And it wasn't any weirder than any of the events of the last 3 days had been. I sat on the sofa, chewing salad greens tossed in olive oil and sucking on grapes, toying with ideas and playing with the skeleton key. I pulled the vodka bottle out from my bag, only to find it empty. Well, there's a shocker. I tossed it across the room and it landed with a thud on the floor. Of course! You don't even have the decency to break. No scripts, no booze, and I knew there was only one bottle of wine left. Just fucking kill me. I was going to have to go into town. This was not high on my list of fun things for Andi to do while back in her hometown activities, considering I didn't actually like this place. Beyond that, there was the little problem of getting there. Town is about a 25-minute drive. drive. That's a thing that I don't do. I have no need to. My career affords me the luxury of never having to do that. I have too much anxiety to function behind the wheel of a 2-ton killing machine. I knew my parents' Cavalier was in the garage, and I knew where the keys were. Okay, desperate times, I guess. There was no way I was going to make it the next 11 days with no alcohol. I'm sorry, demon, protector, ancient being. You're going to have to allow me some kind of escape while I'm here. I am going to the store tomorrow, and I will be bringing back booze. You touch it, things will get ugly. I found it hilarious that I was threatening some kind of ancient being. He, whatever and wherever he was probably laughing his ass off at me. Oh no. Was I actually starting to believe that? I toyed with the keys some more, looking at it from every angle, hoping for an inscription, being mildly irritated at not finding one. I picked up my phone to check the time. 10:03 p.m. I flicked through my messages again. I had 3 new ones, but I'd never heard the notification go off. One was Mel just saying, "Call him! Update me tomorrow!" Another was my therapist checking in, and the third was Lucy. "Andi, I still haven't heard from Adam. I filed a missing persons report today. Sheriff Clark wants to talk to you. I hope you are okay. Call if you need. See you sat." Ugh, just perfect. Seriously? Had to hide my pills, huh? Well, that's just great. I decided to finally go into the rest of the house. I had avoided it long enough. With the brief exception of checking all 3 bathrooms for my meds earlier, I'd barely left the living room. Waking up in the guest room this morning didn't count. I was apparently zombie walking when I went into that room. I climbed the stairs and headed down the hall. First on the agenda was my old room. I wondered if it was an office or a fucking yoga studio now. I paused for a moment, then turned the knob and pushed the door open. I braced myself, but to my surprise, found it not converted to a yoga studio or an office. It shocked me to see that they had left it mostly as it was, but it served the dual purpose of some kind of storage room. There were plastic bins piled on top of each other from the far wall all the way over the bed, which still had my leopard print comforter on it. The walls were still dark purple, the one request of my weird youth that they had granted me. There were dolls on a shelf. I had dolls? That's weird. I had no memory of that. Dolls give me the creeps. "Those are going immediately to the donation pile," I said again to no one, as I grabbed an empty bin that was conveniently located directly in front of the shelf. I swept my cast across the shelf, knocking dolls akimbo into the bin as I laughed out loud because it was the most absurd thing to see at that moment. Swirls of lace and curly hair, fluttering eyelashes, and weird doll voices in some bizarre choir colliding with the dull thud of plastic as they hit the bin. Satisfied and feeling good from laughing, I sat the bin in the hallway and went back into the room. I moved a wall of bins full of God's only knows what into the hallway and revealed my desk. I had a momentary lapse of dizziness just seeing that thing again. So many hours of my young life were spent here, writing. I wondered if any of the old stuff was still there. I rummaged through some stuff on top of the desk, which hadn't been touched in a long time, judging from the dust that had settled. There were some yearbooks, which, ew, no thanks. Some pictures of me with the family, looking thrilled to be wearing awful clothes for whatever occasion it was. I froze at what peeked out at me from behind a few birthday cards. It was a picture of what could only be me, looking gaunt, the faintest trace of bruising on my collarbone and neck. It was on top of a manila folder with a bunch of numbers on the label. I sat down and opened it up, putting the photo of me, which I discovered to be paperclipped to the outside of it, carefully off to the side. Warning. Just wanted to make sure that I got that out there. Sensitive content approaching. There were more pictures of me inside the folder. inside the folder, neatly tucked inside a plastic sleeve. They were all numbered. They were different angles, some of my whole body. There were angry red marks all over my back, and I looked like a fucking skeleton. Everything about my appearance was ghastly. I was ashen, for fuck's sake. My bones were protruding. I had no memory of ever being that thin, or that color. My left arm was full of fresh scabs. My hair was not my normal golden red. It was black and shaved into a mohawk that I never remembered having. What the hell? I sat the photos to the side and turned my attention to the first page of what looked like some kind of file. Patient AR 721-319-0. The same number that was taped across all the photos. I guess that was me. I read a series of bullet points inside the folder. Patient displays markings of a self-inflicted nature, lateral lances on the interior of the left arm. Patient is right-handed. Patient presents contusions on neck and zone 2 consistent with strangulation. Patient presents severe malnourishment, protrusion of ribs, and so on. I turned through pages of what seemed like abuse and wondered for a moment how I had escaped child services. Maybe I hadn't. Maybe I was so untethered from reality that I had been adopted by these people that had died and I didn't know any better. I read on. Patient presents a severe dissociative coping mechanism. Patient presents extreme escapism and fully manifested alternate reality. Patient presents antisocial tendencies. Recommend intense therapy. Patient also presents PTSD symptoms consistent with trauma. Trauma not verified. Patient presents pathological tendencies. Patient presents psychopathic behavior. Then in red ink, scrolled across the bottom of the page, unstable, potential harm to self and others. Recommend patient AR 721-319-0 for institutionalization. If I hadn't been sitting down already, I would have fallen down. It was like the wind had gotten knocked out of me. My head instantly throbbed as I tried to get my bearings. There was no denying that it was me in the photos unless I had some twin sister that I had no knowledge of. There was also the nagging thought of something that Vlad had said. He'd said that he'd also been in an institution, or something to that effect. Also, as in you and I, we have this thing in common. It hadn't hit me in that way when he'd said it to me, but now it clicked. There was no memory of any such thing. I turned the page. The section was laid out differently than the first section. The first page said date of admittance. Well, there it was in black and white, my legal name, my date of birth, my height, my weight, all the identifiers which had made up who I was at the age of 15, judging by the date noted next to the person that signed me in. My mother's unmistakable signature flowed across the page under the admitted under the release of verbiage. I laughed out loud because I didn't know what else to do. I slammed the file shut before looking at any of what followed. I pushed it to the side. Suddenly, I felt like breaking things. There was this deadly cocktail of confusion, anger, and latent recognition. Again, as though some memory was scratching to resurface, tickling its ghostly fingers into the hairs at the base of my neck, mixing inside me. What had happened to me? I knew there was tension with my parents, but I thought it was just because they didn't approve of my lifestyle, or the fact that I wanted to live in the city, that I had a weird job that explored imagination and unreal things, which after what I'd just read, that made sense, and that I didn't have a husband. My mother practically begged me to settle down with any guy I'd date for more than 2 months. I recalled a phone conversation with her once when I was talking about the emotional abuse I was being put through by my then boyfriend, whose name has thankfully escaped me, wherein she was trying to convince me that I had a good thing and I should just be nicer to him. I was in a rough patch then, but later I remember being furious that she'd suggested it. I thought it was because I was nuts. It seems there is a lot more behind why I ended up that way. It also seems more likely that Vladimir Lupai is not a hack. I didn't know what to do next. My eyes flicked back over to the file. I wish you were here, whatever you are. I would love some answers if you had any to offer. Just then, the key fell off the chain and landed with a clunk onto the desk in front of me. I couldn't help but chuckle. Okay, Point taken. Find what this key unlocks. Thanks, friend. I still had no idea where to look or what I was looking for, other than a doorway. I found the chain in my lap. Curiously, the chain had apparently just come unclasped. That was a little odd, but certainly not impossible. I slipped the key back on it and put it back around my neck and double-checked that it was fastened. I suddenly felt so dizzy that I could no longer sit up. I laid my head on my arm and thought, I'll just shut my eyes for a minute. I felt heavy, as if I was being pulled down into a murky liquid that was too thick to be water. Then everything faded. And that concludes our story for tonight. So, thank you so much for listening. I hope you are all enjoying it. There will be more. I originally had said I was going to split this one up and not do it every week, but I think I'm smashing that idea and I'm just going to continue to tell this one. I really, really, really appreciate you all hanging out with me. I would love to hear any ideas or theories that you might have. Any of you who are subscribed, love you. Thank you so much for that. Seriously, thank you so much. Have a good night.